なたのすべてが好きよ好きよ好きよ好きよ好きよ一番好きよ
Episode 10 Escape from the Multiverse, Part 3. The electric shock from Lum reactivated the antimatter device. A brilliant flash engulfed Ataru and Shinobu, and once again they vanished into a swirling vortex of light and energy. A heartbeat later, they were hurled through space and tumbled across the grass of a quiet park. Just before Shinobu crashed into a tree, Ataru grabbed her tightly, cushioning her fall. Thanks, Ataru. Ouch, that was quite a landing. Are you okay, Shinobu? I'm fine, thanks. What about you? Ataru slowly pushed himself up, rubbing his back. I think I twisted something when I landed, but it's nothing serious. He carefully surveyed their surroundings. This time we'd better stay together. We still don't know if we've made it back to our world or ended up in yet another reality. Shinobu nodded. You're right. Let's figure it out together. The two began walking through the park. Everything around them looked perfectly normal. People jogged along the riverside path. Families enjoyed the afternoon together. Children ran around, carrying balloons and masks of their favorite TV heroes, while couples strolled peacefully beneath the trees. In the distance, they spotted Sakura walking hand in hand with Tsubame. Nothing seemed out of place. Shinobu carefully looked around. It looks exactly the same. Just like our world. Just like the last one. Ataru slowly shook his head. Looks can be deceiving. The only way to know for sure is to go to my house. Shinobu nodded in agreement. But before they could take another step, a familiar voice shattered the peaceful silence. Darling! A figure came soaring down from the sky. It was Lum. Darling, where have you been this time? Sneaking around with Shinobu again? Ataru and Shinobu froze. They looked at each other for a long moment, whoa, then let out the exact same exhausted sigh. Not again, Ataru muttered. We're in the wrong universe. Again, Shinobu finished with a resigned smile. She stepped forward. Don't do anything, Ataru. Let me talk to her. She's an alien. She knows about space, physics, maybe even parallel universes. It'll be much easier if I explain everything. But Lum didn't even let her finish. The instant she landed in front of them, she raised one hand. That doesn't change anything. A powerful bolt of electricity shot from her body, racing straight toward Ataru. The blast hit him head-on. He was launched several meters through the air before crashing to the ground, completely unconscious. Lum floated down beside him, grabbed him by the collar with one hand, and effortlessly flew off toward the Moroboshi residence. Shinobu, knocked backward by the shockwave, reached out desperately. No, Lum. Wait. But it was already too late. Lum and Ataru disappeared into the sky, leaving Shinobu alone once again, in another strange, parallel universe. Shinobu sprang to her feet and dashed toward the Moroboshi residence. She had barely gone a few yards when someone caught her eye. She stopped dead in her tracks. What? She rubbed her eyes, convinced they were playing tricks on her. No. It was Ataru. But not the Ataru Lum had just carried away. This Ataru was casually strolling through the park with a notebook in one hand, chasing after every pretty girl he saw. Excuse me, miss. Would you mind giving me your address? And your phone number? Some girls ignored him completely. Others answered with an irritated slap across the face. As Ataru stubbornly continued his hopeless pursuit, Shinobu let out a weary sigh. I'd better make sure he doesn't see me. If he finds out there are two Atarus in this world, things will get even more complicated. She quietly changed direction, hoping to slip around him unnoticed. She had taken only a few steps when, Shinobu! Fancy meeting you here! Before she could react, Ataru shamelessly reached out to grope her, as though nothing were out of the ordinary. Shinobu's response was instantaneous. With flawless judo technique, she grabbed him, swung him clean over her shoulder, and hurled him straight into the trunk of a nearby tree. Wham! The impact shook the entire tree. Ataru slid down the trunk and landed flat on his back, completely dazed. Without giving him a chance to utter a single word, Shinobu took off running once more toward the Moroboshi house. Meanwhile, the real Ataru slowly began to regain consciousness. He was lying on a futon, surrounded by his books, records, posters, and all his familiar belongings. For one wonderful moment, he thought he had finally made it home. He slowly opened his eyes. Floating directly in front of him was a strange little creature glaring at him with obvious irritation. "Why are you staring at me like that, you idiot?" Ataru blinked several times. "Huh?" Hovering before him was a tiny Oni with jade green hair, a single horn on his head, and a yellow tiger-striped diaper. "And? Who are you?" The little creature frowned. "Don't tell me Lum hit you so hard you've forgotten you still owe me money." "Money?" Ataru never finished the sentence. "The fire!" The little Oni opened his mouth and unleashed an enormous stream of flames. Ataru threw himself flat onto the floor just in time. "Hey, are you trying to burn the house down?" The tiny Oni inhaled deeply once more. "Fire!" Another torrent of flames blasted through the room. Ataru bolted downstairs as fast as his legs could carry him. Behind him, the little Oni floated through the air, happily spitting fireball after fireball. The scorching heat almost reached his back. "Cut it out!" At last, he reached the front entrance. He yanked the door open and slammed headfirst into another Ataru who had just stepped inside. Crash! Both of them were knocked backward, landing on the floor completely stunned. "Ow, that hurt," muttered the newly arrived Ataru. The little Oni stopped in midair and looked back and forth between them. "Huh?" He scratched his head. "Looks like Rand's been fooling around with one of those cloning guns again." He studied both boys carefully. "That's weird. Neither of you has the little floating comma over your head. So you're not clones." He thought about it for another moment. "I guess it's just another one of Rand's crazy inventions. What a pain." He let out a long sigh. "And now I've got to deal with two Ataris. I don't have time for this. We'll settle that money you owe me later." Without waiting for either of them to answer, Little Ten took another deep breath. Fire! A gigantic blast of flames engulfed both Ataris at once. When the smoke finally cleared, both boys were still standing. Their clothes were charred black. Their hair smoked gently. Their faces were completely covered in soot. Tiny puffs of smoke drifted from their mouths every time they exhaled. Perfectly satisfied with his work, Ten floated out through the front door and disappeared down the street. The two Ataris could only stand there, staring at each other in complete bewilderment. A little while later, the two Ataris were sitting together in the kitchen, sharing sandwiches and glasses of milk. Our Ataru couldn't understand why his counterpart was acting so casually. The other Ataru had welcomed another version of himself into his home, as if it were something that happened every other week. The awkward silence finally came to an end. Still chewing with his mouth half full, the Ataru of this world looked up and asked, "So, what exactly are you supposed to be? One of Rand's clones? Another fake made by Lum? Some spell Sakura cooked up? Or maybe an alien who copied my appearance to invade Earth?" Our Ataru opened his mouth to answer. "Well, actually." "Ah, never mind." The other Ataru stuffed the last bite of his sandwich into his mouth in one gulp. "Either way, you can do me a huge favor." He stood up from the table, straightened his school uniform, carefully combed his hair in the mirror by the entrance, and slipped on his shoes. "While I'm out looking for girls, you can keep Lum busy for a while so she'll leave me alone." "Wait, you can't go now. I have to explain." But the other Ataru had already opened the front door. Without listening to a single word, he dashed down the street. Our Ataru hurried after him, hoping to catch up. He had barely stepped outside when Lum descended from the sky and landed directly in front of him. "So, trying to sneak away and flirt with other girls again, darling?" "No, wait, I'm not." He never got to finish. A massive bolt of electricity exploded around him. The shock coursed through his entire body from head to toe. Our Ataru collapsed to the ground, smoking from every inch of his body. Lum tilted her head. That's strange." She looked down at her own hands. "Have my lightning bolts gotten stronger?" Then she looked back at Ataru. "Or have you gotten weaker? You usually take a lot more punishment than this." Still twitching and trailing little curls of smoke, our Ataru struggled to sit up. No. I'm not your Ataru." At that exact moment, "Lum, stop!" Shinobu came sprinting toward them. "He's telling the truth." Lum turned toward her in complete confusion. "What is going on?" Shinobu took a deep breath before beginning her explanation. "We came here from another dimension. An accident sent us traveling through parallel universes. A few minutes ago, we met the real Ataru of this world. He just left the house to go chase girls in the park. She pointed toward the boy sitting on the ground. This isn't your Ataru. He's the Ataru from our world. Then she pointed to herself. And I'm not the Shinobu of this world either. Lum stood perfectly still. Her eyes shifted slowly from Ataru to Shinobu and back again. For perhaps the first time in a very long time, the Oni princess had absolutely no explanation for what she was seeing. 2 Atarus. 2 Shinobus. Even for someone raised among alien technology, bizarre creatures, and the strangest phenomena the universe had to offer, the idea of travelers crossing between parallel dimensions was beyond anything she had ever imagined. Several hours later, night had fallen over Tomobiki. The Moroboshi family was gathered around the dinner table. Mr. and Mrs. Moroboshi, Lum, the Ataru of this world, and as honored guests, Ataru and Shinobu from another dimension. Together, they shared dinner while recounting the unbelievable events of the day. Our Ataru couldn't help staring at the scene in disbelief. Lum clung affectionately to the other Ataru's arm, resting her head against his shoulder. Every so often, she gently stroked his hair, kissed him on the cheek, and beamed happily. Isn't that right, darling? The other Ataru simply kept eating with the weary expression of someone who had long since accepted his fate. He quietly shoveled rice and side dishes into his mouth without answering. Finally, our Ataru broke the silence. I hope you don't mind me asking, but how did you end up living in my house? Well, in his house. Lum smiled brightly. It's very simple. After the tag game, Darling proposed to me in front of everyone. So we've been living together ever since. And I've never been happier. She hugged him even tighter. Isn't that right, darling? The other Ataru continued eating without saying a word. Mrs. Moroboshi laughed softly. They're not married yet. They're only engaged. Then she added with a warm smile, and besides, Lum paid off the enormous debt this poor fool owed those space taxi drivers. Space taxi drivers? Both Ataru and Shinobu exclaimed in perfect unison. Shinobu looked thoughtfully at the couple. So, in this world, you two are actually happy together. Our Ataru slowly shook his head. Our reality is completely different. Shinobu continued the explanation. In our world, Lum stayed on Earth after the competition for only one reason: to get revenge on Ataru. Ever since then, she hasn't stopped chasing us, or turning our lives upside down. Lum's eyes widened. How strange. It's completely different here. She lovingly stroked her fiancé's arm once more. Isn't that right, darling? The other Ataru remained silent, calmly eating his dinner. Mrs. Moroboshi chuckled. Don't let them fool you. Those two argue every single day. They fight like cats and dogs. So your world probably isn't as different from ours as you think. Shinobu took a deep breath. Lum, do you think you could help us return to our own universe? Lum answered without the slightest hesitation. Of course. Tomorrow morning, we'll go to my spaceship and contact Ran. I'm sure she'll figure out a way to send you home. Since it had grown quite late, the Moroboshis offered their guests a place to spend the night. Ataru spread out a sleeping bag on the living room floor. Shinobu settled onto the couch beneath a pile of blankets. Before long, the house grew completely quiet. But sometime in the middle of the night, Shinobu's eyes slowly opened. She had heard footsteps. Our Ataru was quietly making his way toward the front door. Ataru, where are you going? He stopped. After a long silence, he let out a deep, exhausted sigh. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes, and the fatigue on his face was far greater than anything he had shown during dinner. You have no idea what kind of hell my life has been ever since that girl showed up. Shinobu listened silently. She says she's my fiancée, but I never asked her to move into my house. From the very first day, she's done nothing but make my life miserable. She electrocutes me every time I even look at another girl. She turned the whole neighborhood against me. She even transferred into my school just to keep an eye on me every minute of the day. She's constantly clinging to me, groping me, calling me darling morning, noon, and night, and she forces me to eat those alien recipes, so unbelievably spicy they could melt a bunker. And on top of all that, she somehow drags me into one disaster after another. He lowered his head in defeat. Guys, you've got to help me. At that very moment, a voice echoed down from the second floor. Darling, the Ataru of this world instantly went pale. She's awake. He shoved his feet into his shoes at lightning speed and bolted out the front door before Lum could catch him. Shinobu watched the whole scene in silence. Then she turned toward our Ataru. For several long moments, she said nothing. Finally, "There isn't anything going on between you and this Lum, is there?" Our Ataru's eyes flew open in disbelief. "What? How can you even think that? You know better than anyone what the Lum from our world has put us through. Do you really think I'd have an affair with her?" A look of relief spread across Shinobu's face. Without another word, she stepped forward and quietly wrapped her arms around him. Ataru froze. For several moments, he couldn't move at all. Outside, in the darkness of the night, they could still hear Lum's cheerful voice chasing her, darling, through the streets of Tomobiki. The following morning, aboard Lum's flying saucer, Ataru and Shinobu watched as the Oni princess opened a video call to Ran, somewhere on the far side of the galaxy. After carefully listening to everything that had happened, Ran began explaining. "To send you back to your own universe, the antimatter box has to be reset. Once it's restarted, the device will transmit an interdimensional beacon. The Ran from your reality will detect that signal, locate the box, and synchronize it precisely with the point where it was left behind. Once that's done, she'll be able to open a portal and bring you home." As Ran spoke, the saucer's computer automatically began transmitting a long series of reset instructions to Lum. Lum quickly read through them before turning back to Ataru and Shinobu. "Perfect. I'll go reset the device right away. As soon as the beacon is detected, the Ran from your universe will be able to retrieve you. In the meantime, make yourselves at home. If you're hungry, help yourselves to anything in the kitchen. I won't be long." Without waiting for a reply, she floated out through the hatch and flew toward the park where the antimatter box had been left behind. The evening sun was already beginning to set over Tomobiki. The video call remained open. Ran looked back toward the screen and smiled. "You're still there?" Shinobu returned the smile. "We just wanted to thank you. The Lum from this world has been incredibly kind to us." Ran let out a laugh, dripping with irony. "Kind?" She continued preparing a cake without ever taking her eyes off her work. "So, you've fallen for Lum's act. Just like everyone else. She acts sweet, gentle. She even looks innocent. But don't let that fool you. It's nothing more than a mask. In reality, she's far colder, far more calculating, and far more manipulative than she lets anyone see. And believe me, she always knows exactly what she wants." Ran's expression darkened. If only you knew what she was like as a child. Ataru and Shinobu exchanged curious glances. Lum was the only daughter of the Oni royal family. Everyone spoiled her. No one ever told her no. She grew up believing the entire universe existed to satisfy her every whim. Her voice became colder. "I was a little younger than she was. Our families were close. So I was practically forced to play with Lum every single day." She sighed bitterly. "Whenever she got into trouble, she blamed everything on me. I was always the one who got punished. And she remained everyone's perfect little princess." Ran fell silent for a moment before continuing. "As we got older, we started becoming interested in boys. I fell in love with Ray. He was my first love." She lowered her eyes, but Lum couldn't stand seeing me happy. "After flirting with practically every handsome boy in the royal court, and growing bored with all of them, she decided she wanted Ray. Not because she loved him, but because he was the only trophy she didn't already have. And the fact that he loved me only made him even more desirable in her eyes. So just for fun, she started flirting with him. She kept at it until she drove us apart. And once she'd grown tired of him, she simply threw him away. That's who Lum is. The moment she gets what she wants, she loses all interest." Shinobu thought quietly for a moment. "But the Lum from this world really seems to love Taru." Ran burst into laughter. "In love? You really don't know Lum at all." Her expression turned completely serious. She insisted on taking part in the tag game, even though she wasn't even assigned to the invasion force. She only wanted to show off. And of course, because she's the king's precious little princess, her father gave her exactly what she wanted. Ran let out another sarcastic laugh. "And when she lost, She became the laughingstock of the entire Oni planet. Humiliated before everyone, she swore revenge against the monkey who had dared defeat her. When she lost the competition, she heard Ataru shout that he was going to marry Shinobu. Ran paused briefly. She knew perfectly well that he was talking to Shinobu, but she took advantage of the confusion and pretended he'd proposed to her instead. She clung to that misunderstanding and publicly forced him into an engagement. Ataru and Shinobu listened without interrupting. From that very moment, she began pretending she was in love with him. Not because she cared about him, but because she realized it was the most effective way to get revenge on the boy who had defeated her. She made sure he couldn't get close to any other girl. She punished him over and over with her electric shocks. And before long, she moved into the Moroboshi house, so she could turn every single day of his life into a living nightmare. Ran smiled bitterly. Her plan is actually very simple. She's just waiting until that poor idiot is completely exhausted, defeated, broken, and desperate. When he finally can't take it anymore, he'll eventually admit that he cheated during the tag game. The moment that happens, she'll demand that the competition be declared invalid. And then, the Oni King's army will finally have the perfect excuse to invade Earth. They'll enslave all of humanity, and Ataru himself will become Lum's personal slave. A fitting way to crush the morale of the entire human race. Ataru and Shinobu stood there in stunned silence. Shinobu was the first to speak. But Lum paid off Ataru's debt to those space taxi drivers. That doesn't sound like something someone would do if she wanted to destroy him. Ran laughed again. You actually believe that story? She slowly shook her head. That so-called space taxi driver is an old acquaintance of the Oni royal family. In reality, he's one of the palace's personal chauffeurs. The whole thing was planned in advance. They made sure Ataru ended up with an impossible debt, one that only Lum could afford to pay. As the crown princess, she was the only one with enough money. That gave her the perfect excuse to move into the Moroboshi house and stay beside him day and night, watching him, controlling him, and making his life miserable. Silence filled the cabin. Ataru could hardly believe what he had just heard. Just then, Ran's eyes suddenly shifted toward the screen. Her expression changed instantly. Behind Ataru and Shinobu, standing beside the saucer's open hatch, Lum was quietly watching them. It was obvious she'd been listening for quite some time. Ran forced an awkward smile. Well, I just remembered I have something very important to do. It was nice meeting you two. Without waiting for a reply, she immediately cut the connection. The screen went black. Ataru remained frozen for a moment. Then he blurted out, "The Ataru of this world has to know the truth. He's being deceived." Shinobu slowly shook her head. "No, Ataru. What happens in this universe belongs to them. Our only job is to find a way back to our own." The two turned around. And in that instant, they understood exactly why Ran had ended the call so abruptly. Lum was still standing there. Her arms were folded. A faint smile rested on her face. Well, she looked at them with perfect composure. Ran is just as indiscreet as ever. Her smile slowly turned cold. "So, it seems you know the whole truth now." Ataru instinctively took a step backward. Lum. "Unfortunately, I can't allow any of that information to leave this ship." Without another word, powerful bolts of electricity burst from both of her hands. The blast struck Ataru and Shinobu simultaneously. Both collapsed to the floor, their bodies completely paralyzed by the shock. Taking advantage of the fact that neither of them could move, Lum opened a storage compartment inside the saucer and pulled out a coil of heavy-duty rope. With astonishing speed and practiced efficiency, she tightly bound their wrists and ankles. Then she secured sturdy gags over their mouths, making sure neither of them could utter a single word. Ataru and Shinobu struggled desperately. They twisted, pulled, tried everything they could to break free, but every effort was completely futile. Lum watched them silently for a few moments. Then, in a calm, almost gentle voice, she spoke. "I'm sorry, you two, but I can't allow the Ataru of this world to hear a single word of what you've just learned." With that, she closed the saucer's hatch, leaving the two prisoners bound and helpless inside as the evening sky over Tomobiki slowly faded into twilight. Without giving them even a moment to recover, Lum took another length of thick rope and reinforced their bindings. Within seconds, Ataru and Shinobu were completely tied up from head to toe. She looked down at them with a serene little smile. Well, at least now you've confirmed I'm not quite as sweet as I seem. She walked over to the control panel. After all, I'm the one who's going to send you back to your own universe. Before you get the chance to tell my Ataru everything you've discovered. She fell silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was much colder. I don't know what kind of relationship my other self has with the Ataru from your world. But for me, living under the same roof as that insect has been anything but easy. She slowly clenched her fists. For months, I've had to endure his insults, his constant disrespect toward me and toward my family. Tiny sparks crackled around the tips of her horns. If intergalactic law weren't so strict, I would have reduced him to ashes a long time ago. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. But it won't be much longer. A slow smile spread across her face. Sooner or later, that miserable fool will finally break. He'll admit, through tears, that he never should have groped me. Or stolen my bra to win the tag game. She raised her head proudly. The moment he confesses that his victory was nothing but cheating, the result of the competition will be declared invalid. Her voice carried the solemn certainty of a royal decree. And then, my father will lead the entire Oni fleet in a full-scale invasion of Earth. She fixed her gaze on Ataru. And on that day, I'll personally make sure he pays for every humiliation he ever made me suffer. A chill ran down Ataru's and Shinobu's spines. Until this moment, neither of them had imagined that an Oni could hold on to a grudge for so long. And, for the very first time, they couldn't help wondering whether the Lum from their own universe might be hiding similar feelings deep inside. Perhaps, after everything they had been through, they had been far luckier than they had ever realized. At that very moment, one of the lights on the control panel began flashing insistently. Loom turned her eyes toward the controls. Perfect. A satisfied smile spread across her face. The Ran from this universe has found the beacon. She quickly entered a series of commands into the console. Now I'll send them back to the exact spot where they disappeared. She turned toward them one last time. It was a pleasure meeting you two. A few minutes later, the flying saucer glided over the park where the antimatter device had been left behind. The small box was glowing with an intense light. A swirling vortex of energy began to form above it. Without the slightest ceremony, Lum swung open the saucer's hatch and with one powerful kick, sent Shinobu and Ataru tumbling into the open air. Still bound and gagged, they could do nothing as she burst into laughter. The two of them fell straight into the brilliant glow of the antimatter device. The vortex swallowed them instantly. In the blink of an eye, they vanished into the light. Standing at the open hatch, Lum watched as the portal slowly sealed itself shut. A faint smile of satisfaction crossed her face. Without another glance behind her, she guided the saucer into the crimson evening sky above Tomobiki, while silence once again settled over the park. Still tied up and gagged, Ataru and Shinobu were swept through the antimatter vortex as the space around them transformed once more into an endless tunnel of light. Then, without warning, a familiar voice echoed through the swirling energy. Ataru! Shinobu! I'm so glad I finally found you again. It was Ran. Her voice reached them in strange, distorted waves, as though it had traveled across countless dimensions. I'm so sorry the antimatter box was left behind. I never imagined you'd end up jumping through so many different universes. For a brief instant, Ran's face appeared inside the vortex like a transparent, ghostly image. But everything's almost fixed now. Thanks to the Lum from the last universe reactivating the device, I was finally able to synchronize the signal again. Ataru and Shinobu tried to answer, but with their mouths still gagged, only muffled, unintelligible sounds escaped. Ran smiled. I still can't bring you straight back home. The synchronization isn't stable yet. Her expression became more serious. You'll have to pass through a couple more universes first. After that, I'll be able to open a stable portal back to your own reality. Her image slowly began to fade. Whatever happens, don't get separated. Stay close to the antimatter box at all times. As long as you're with it, I'll be able to keep tracking you and guide you safely back home. The connection was on the verge of breaking. Then Rand suddenly remembered something. Oh, and Ray says hello? Her image vanished completely. Once again, the vortex engulfed Ataru and Shinobu. A new flash of light pierced the darkness, and the two of them were hurled toward yet another completely unknown universe. To be continued?